Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushal Mehra. My guest today is Dr. Mehra. Dr. Mehra is the ex-dean of AIM AIMS New Delhi, and he's back on the podcast after a few months because I have too many questions. So, sir, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right, sir. So obviously we will talk about the Omicron variant and the journey. But sir, मेरी request है आपसे, can we start once again for the benefit of the viewers, because हो सकता है people may not have seen the first time we had our discussion when you were given that beautiful presentation. So for the benefit of the viewers, sir, can we go back to the beginning again, and if you could maybe explain people what SARS-CoV-2 is, how it has come about, and what has been the journey so far?
Okay, let me start with telling the people that the pandemics, this is a pandemic that we have got after 1 century. So the pandemics are not something new to the humanity. We have seen pandemics in the past. There was one, the plague in the 6th century, then plague again came in the 14th century, and then there were pandemics of smallpox. And the last century, of course, you saw that there was Spanish flu. And the number of deaths during the Spanish flu were far more than what we have seen now. The fatality rate was very, very high. We had about 50 to 100 million deaths, actually. And in the 21st century, we have already seen not one but three coronavirus infections. And I'm sure many of you remember that the first coronavirus infection was in 2002. It was not a pandemic, it was endemic. And again, it started from Guangzhou, China. And the case fatality rate at that time was also very high. It was almost like 10 to 11% there. The second one came in 2012, which we called MERS because it was mostly confined to Saudi Arabia and the region around that part of the Gulf. So it was called MERS, MERS. And again, the fatality rate at that time was 34.5%. A lot of people died at that time. Now we have a pandemic, which has already spread to more than 216 countries or regions. And today, 290 million infections are known, and at least 6 countries have recorded more than 1 crore infections. India still stands at number 2 with about 3.5 crores. But if you look at the case fatality rate of this is really about 2.2, so much lower than the earlier two coronaviruses. The only thing is that this has spread to all over the world. The other very important point I wanted to say was that we know that the virus begins from bats. Bats are the natural host for this. And even till date, the world scientific community has been eagerly trying to find the origin of this virus. And tracing the origin of the virus is very, very important. It is important for in-depth investigations that are required to understand the spread in humans. It is also required for timely control of the future pandemics of the same type. But what is more important, it is very important to find the answer to the question: how did the evolutionary transition occur from a primarily bat adapted virus to the human virus? And you remember by last year or in early part of 2020, we were all the time saying it's a jump species. It's come from bats, jump species. There has been an intermediary species in between, and from there it has come to the humans. The virus has actually adapted, and there was one transition which we already knew, one sort of mutation which we call D614G, aspartic acid becoming glycine at position 614 of the spike protein of the virus, because it gave the ability to the virus to attach strongly to the AC2 receptors of the lungs. So it is primarily a virus that affects the lungs and the upper respiratory tract. But that doesn't mean that it only affects over there. There are other organs in the body which also have the AC2, so the virus also attaches over there. And you have known that a lot of people who developed COVID, they developed long COVID. And many of them have the problem of the GI tract because of the fact that the AC2 receptors are in fact found with the highest kind of frequency in the GI tract. And they are also expressed on the heart, the kidney, the liver, and all. So people can develop all kinds of other secondary problems in relation to the COVID 19. The other thing that I had talked to you last time was there is an imbalance in the host immunity to SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, this virus that we calling this SARS-CoV-2 because the earlier one in 2002 we called just SARS because we had not called it a SARS-1. Nobody thought that there would be a SARS-2. So now that remains as a SARS, or you can call SARS-1, but now we call it a SARS-CoV-2. And the disease that it causes is called the COVID-19 because 19 because it was first time seen towards the end of the year 2019. Generally, anytime we fall sick with due to a virus infection or a bacterial infection or a parasitic or a fungal infection, the nature has already given you a very strong immunity, a very strong host immunity. And the host immunity has two components. At the moment, you people have learned over the last 2 years mostly antibodies. Antibodies is just one component of the host immunity, and we call it as the humoral arm of the immune system. It is subserved by the B lymphocytes or the B cells, which must turn into plasma cells, and the plasma cells make antibodies. And by the way, I should mention right over here, plasma cells have a life. Plasma cells senesce after about 4 to 5 months. And therefore, you're seeing that the antibody titers start to go down. That doesn't mean that the immunity has already gone down. Because the second arm of the immune system is even more robust, and that is the cell mediated immunity, which is subserved by the T cells. Now, there are T lymphocytes and there are B lymphocytes, and I don't want to go into further details on those. There are many, many other subtypes of the T cells. There are subtypes of the B cells as well. But suffice for me to say over here that the immune system has two arms: antibody arm, which due to the viral infection, the B cells get activated. They are turned into plasma cells, and the plasma cells will make antibodies. The other arm is the T cell arm, which goes into the memory mode, and the memory cells are formed. We have CD4 helper T cells formed, CD8 cytotoxic or the killer T cells formed, and they remain in the memory mode. And that is what we are saying, that after you get vaccinated, you generate a battery of those memory cells which remain in your memory box. So that second time, if the same infection comes up, it's like an army. It's like an army you have already made, and they will come into play. But what happened during the COVID-19? Now, these are two parts of what I call adaptive immune system. The again immune system has got two components. One is called the innate immunity. Innate is that you're born with it. You got it from your moms. Innate immunity that comes into play right there. But the innate immunity turns into adaptive immunity, or sort of goes into the adaptive mode. Adaptive is something that you learned throughout your life. You have been exposed to a number of parasites or infectious agents. Therefore, your immune system learns and adapts. It's called the adaptive immunity. So those two arms that I said are arms of the adaptive immunity, but the innate immunity is also very important. What happens in SARS-CoV-2 infection is that there's a case of innate immune hyperactivation. In normal course, your innate immune system should go down, and the whole job of fighting the infection is taken over by the adaptive immune system. So, but here the innate immune system remains in a hyper mode, while the adaptive goes down, it goes in a hypo mode, other way around than the normal. And this is something unique that we saw also in this SARS-CoV-2 infection. And you may remember that I have started writing for newspapers, and my first starting, and this was all again my children were very keen that, Dad, you have written so many scientific articles all your life. Why don't you write now for the common man? So I've been writing. My first article came up in on April 1, by the way, 2020, in Hindustan Times, and I had mentioned at that time that three factors. I know my title was, "Can India be an outlier in the spread of COVID-19?" The question was that there are three factors which I thought would make sure that the severity of COVID-19 disease in India would be lower as compared to our counterparts in the West. And number two, the death rate will be lower. And I'm glad even today our death rate due to COVID 19 is much lower than all other countries around the world. As I said, that the median death rate due to COVID 19, with all those 29 crore infections that we have got so far, is about 1.2%. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 2.2. While in India, it has remained as 1.2, and in the US and other European countries, goes beyond 10 or maybe 12 or so. And that is because of the fact, the three factors that I had discussed at that time, and they are still relevant even now. One was the broad based immunity that the Indians have, and that is because of the Indian population. The population in the subcontinent has been exposed to a very high microbial load. We have been living under, compared to the Western standards, in a more infectious environment. So our immune system is already in a hyper state, and there are cross-reactive antibodies formed. So what I called was a broad-based immunity that the Indian population has. Number two factor was the environmental factors and the food habits. The Indian food that we take is really remarkable. The kind of masalas we add, the turmeric and things of that sort. These are all known to be, and there are all kinds of literature available in homeopathy and other Indian systems of medicine, indicating that the food habits of India, the Indian food, actually stimulates the immunity. But number three is a very scientific component, and that is the extensive diversity of what we call the HLA system. You know, when the virus infection takes place, the T lymphocyte and B lymphocyte directly cannot see the virus directly. They must be presented on a plate. It is like, I try to make it a little simpler. I am a very formal guest. I come to your house. You give me tea in a mug. I don't take it. I'm a formal guest. Unless you give me on a saucer and a cup in a very formal way. Saucer cup. The saucer is what we call the HLA plate, or the major histocompatibility complex. It's a little technical term. But foreign antigen cannot be seen by the host immunity unless it is presented by that saucer, that plate. That plate is very diverse in India, much more diverse than our counterparts in the West. That is another indication, because of our studies that we have done, that we had done in AIMS for several years, demonstrating novel genes and very high diversity of this plate in India, again driven due to the microbial load, that actually indicated that the ability of the population in India to present a foreign peptide, a viral derived peptides, viral derived antigens to the immune system, is remarkably higher than our Western counterparts. So these were all factors which gave me an indication that we will have lower deaths and our severity of infection will be low. So those were just the background information I wanted to give. By the way, I did produce a white paper on host immunity and vaccines, which was published in the February of 2021, talked about the first wave and how this virus actually spread. And I have a soft copy and I can forward it to you, and anybody can actually have a look at it. So this
Great.
is, I just wanted to begin with you. And the other one very important point, and then you can take over, is what does the vaccine do? We are giving vaccination and we are generating an immune response. Your immune response to any virus can be generated by two ways. Either you get the natural infection and get cured out of it. So, therefore, you develop a whole battery of memory T cells. The other is we are giving you vaccine. The vaccine where we are giving a synthetic virus, the spike protein of the virus. And what this vaccine does is it boosts your the host immunity to what we call a primary immune response. And then you give a second dose, and then you get what we call fully vaccinated. And we will talk about as you go along the need for a booster now, or what we call the additional dose or a third dose. But the two doses are very important because they are the ones which will then put your host immunity to a state of active alert, or in a secondary immune response mode where the memory cells have also been formed, the neutralizing antibodies have been formed, and they will take care of the invading virus.
So, just a question on the vaccines. What do you make of this entire debate going around in the world, where we have not been able to even come up with a solid answer to what should be the gap in the case of AstraZeneca or Covishield from the first dose or the second dose? Now, somebody says 12 weeks, somebody says 8 weeks, and then on that, why are there so many varying answers? What are the reasons for that?
This varies from vaccine to vaccine. For example, the Pfizer and the Moderna, these are what we call mRNA based vaccines. Here, the gap between the first and the second dose has to be about 3 to 4 weeks, primarily 3 weeks. This vaccine that we have is the adenovirus based vaccine. And adenovirus based vaccine, the ideal sort of gap has to be about 8 to 10 weeks. But then studies were done during SARS-CoV-2 infection, very prominent studies done in UK, which indicated that if you further increase this gap to say 12 weeks or 12 to 14 weeks or 16 weeks, you are more liable to generate a more effective immunity. The antibody titers will actually go up. And that is why India also adopted that. India also did their own studies, very minor studies done in India, also indicated the same thing, that if you increase the gap. Now, this increasing gap was very useful to UK at that time, because you remember UK, of course, started giving their vaccine sometimes in November. We started in India on 16th of January, and they had their second wave in January and February, whereas our second wave came after March. It was something like April and May. And they felt that now that we have this second wave, and if we can give the one dose to everybody, that will be really good. So they were vaccinating, and then giving a gap of 3 to 4 months. But this gap has a scientific basis, and that is why the Indian scientific community or the Indian expert group never wanted to decrease this gap from 12 weeks down to 10 or 8 weeks. Even today, we maintain, and our own data indicates that a 12-week gap between the first and second dose is scientifically correct, because it actually boosts uh, better immunity in the host, gives you higher titers of what we call neutralizing antibodies.
So, sir, now I have to ask this question. You might be like, "क्यों पूछ रहे हो?" मगर पूछना पड़ता है. Then, a lot of times there is this thing कि vaccines की आवश्यकता नहीं है. I know XYZ, उसने 2 डोज ले ली, उसके बाद भी उसको कोविड हो गया. तो फिर मतलब क्या है? So how do we convince people to get vaccinated in that scenario?
Very good point. I think this is a point that I myself was very keen to sort of put across. Today, more than 66% of our adult population in India, our adult population is estimated to be about 94.5 crores. So about 65 to 66% of them today have been fully vaccinated. When I say fully vaccinated, means two doses there. And at least 24, 23 crores have been given one dose. But there is still about 10 crores of people who have no vaccine at all, who have not taken any dose of the vaccine. And I think now with even the Omicron, and as the variants of concern came up, even during Delta wave, it was clear that people who are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, they get protected from developing a severe infection or getting hospitalized, even protected from death. And today, with the Omicron, that issue has become clear, absolutely clear actually, that the fully vaccinated people may get Omicron infection as well, but that will be mostly, and two-thirds of them would probably have a asymptomatic form of infection, whereas one-third will have very minor symptoms there. People who are at risk are those who have not taken any vaccine so far. So I think the message that should go from this podcast is that people who have not taken even a single dose, please rush towards the vaccination center and you do get your infection, because Omicron is about 4 to 5 times more transmissible actually. And if you have not taken any vaccine, the chances that you will get a severe form of COVID, like those got during Delta wave, are much higher.
Okay, sir. So now I want to understand in relation to this. Now there are obviously different variants of concern. So could you explain to us? Obviously, Omicron is the current variant of concern, but even if we say what are the differing characteristics of the differing variants, like we have the alpha variant, then delta, and now we have Omicron. Now what are the differing characteristics of all these variants, and how do the vaccines perform per se against all these different variants?
All of you have seen the picture of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It's like a crown, it's like a round ball with the crown, what we call the spike. So SARS-CoV-2 variants occur with new mutations in the virus genetic code. Some of these can affect the viral function as well. Mutations in the spike, most of them take place in the spike or in the furin cleavage site, which are the sites which are used by the virus to bind to the human cells and make it easier for the virus to infect the individual uh, rapidly. Other mutations may cause a change in the virus, making it more resistant to antibodies over there. At the moment, this Omicron is our fifth variant of concern. You may remember the first time when the alpha came up, and that was sometimes in January or February, and alpha came up primarily in UK. From UK, it also came to the northern part of India as well. The mutations started to appear in the spike. As the virus actually divides, they keep on dividing. The virus divides. Sometimes there is a difficulties. Sometimes there is some kind of a sort of block, and a change occurs over there. So the spike part of the virus protein that actually binds to the AC2 receptor on the lung cells shows a sort of a wrong, um, nucleotide, and therefore a change takes place over there. The alpha, the beta, the gamma. Gamma, of course, was of no concern at all. And then came the Delta. And Delta was the one which actually sort of pushed up the infections all over the world, including UK, Europe, and everywhere. In India, it came up about 8 to 10 weeks after the second wave was already seen in Europe, actually. And we had that. And now we have the Omicron. Omicron has much more mutations in the spike, about 52 are known. And most of these are located at the point by which the virus attaches onto the AC2 receptors of the lungs. But fortunately, what does this virus do? The Omicron, everybody is talking about today about the Omicron there. I think there are four important aspects of this virus that have to be learned. Number one, does it have an increased contagion? And the answer is yes, because it is more transmissible than even Delta. It is more contagious. The second very important part of the virus would be, does it have an immune escape property? And here the answer is probable. Yes, it does have, because you've seen that the effectivity of the vaccine further goes down about 4 to 5 times than even Delta. Doesn't mean that it has gone down to zero. So, therefore, people who have taken 2 doses of the vaccine, they are still protected from the developing either a severe infection or hospitalization there. And you have seen that even now the number of infections are growing very rapidly. Today, I saw even in Delhi there are more than 4,000 infections, but most of them are in the asymptomatic stage or in the milder stage. Very few people actually require hospitalization, and that has also been the experience in South Africa, experience in the UK, and the US as well. The number three point of the virus changing its color is, does it make people sicker? And that's what Delta had done there, but not Omicron. Data from Omicron so far suggests that it causes only milder symptoms like body ache and myalgia, some headache, and very low temperature and all that. The features that are very suggestive of the flu virus as well. But the fourth is a very important point, the more biological point. Why does it spread fast but causes only milder symptoms? And several studies have come up now, and the answer has become very clear. There is a study done by the US group and the Hong Kong group, where they tried to grow the virus, grow the lung cells in the laboratory, and infected them with the original Wuhan strain and the Delta strain and now the Omicron strain. And they found that there was 10 times less ability of the Omicron to attach to the lung cells. It remained only in the bronchus here, only in the throat. And because it remains in the throat, and therefore the transmission is very high. It can transmit from one to the other very high. It doesn't go down into the lungs, unlike Delta was doing. Delta was going right into the lungs and it's been damaging them. And therefore, you saw that the SpO2 levels will actually vary and go down. And that is not the case with Omicron so far, and this has been the experience so far. That does not mean that we should not take care. We have to be absolutely sure that we continue to maintain the virus appropriate behavior, because we don't want the Omicron also to grow unabashedly in India. If the numbers grow too very high, and some of those people who have not taken any vaccine so far, or people with underlying comorbidities are more likely to develop a severe form of infection. People will start running to the hospital, and it will unnecessarily put load on the hospital infrastructure there. So, but if you have developed Omicron infection, nothing to worry. You don't have to go into the panic mode. At the moment, we are in a safe situation, so much so you have seen that some experts have started saying, is Omicron a natural vaccine? Because of the fact that it doesn't cause a
Yeah.
severe infection. Yeah. Some people have already started talking in those terms, that it could actually be a natural vaccine. And that study actually
So
came from South Africa, and South Africa
okay.
has shown that if you get Omicron infection, the neutralizing antibodies are 14 times higher to Omicron, and also about 4.4 times higher to the Delta strain as well. Mind
Mhm.
it, today, even though has taken over Delta in South Africa, taking over Delta very fast in UK and the US as well, not so much in India so far. So I would say in India, even today, our major variant of concern is Delta, because the number of Omicron infections that we have seen so far are not that very high. Like you see in UK is seeing more than 1 lakh infections a day. And if you translate that in terms of population size, in India we should start to see about 20 to 30, 20 to 22 lakh infections a day. That's not happening yet, but we don't know. So we have to be careful. The point is, even though Omicron causes a milder disease, one has to be very careful.
So on this asymptomatic and symptomatic or mildly symptomatic angle, so is there a difference in the amount of spread that would happen if I came into contact with an asymptomatic carrier of COVID vis-a-vis a symptomatic one? Is there any variation, or they would transmit the virus in the same ratio?
No, I think what the new data that has come up so far indicates that, whereas Delta virus was actually active for about 10 days, here it actually finishes in 5 days' time. So get cured in a much shorter time, in about 5 days' time. Absolutely like the flu-like uh, symptoms over there. So if you come into contact with somebody who you don't know, who might have the infection, and you don't know because he might have an asymptomatic form. And yesterday only, some friend of mine phoned me that I was going to Hong Kong and I got my test done and it turned out to be positive, and I have no symptoms. So there are a lot of people who would be getting Omicron infection. They will be no symptoms. As I said, more than two-thirds of the people with Omicron infection will be asymptomatic, and the rest will develop a very milder form. But the worry is for those who are still without a vaccine so far, and worries for those who may have comorbidities. So for them, it is absolutely necessary that they should be even more careful.
So, sir, is the testing of the Omicron variant different from maybe what was required in the previous variants? Do we need some different kind of a testing method? Like I've heard
Now,
some places that maybe the RT-PCR is not as effective. Maybe the rapid antigen test is more effective in the case of Omicron.
that's not the case. RT-PCR test is very effective. RT-PCR test actually, the test does it amplifies three genes actually. One of the genes in some of the kits was the S gene, S for the spike, S gene. But most of the kits and the laboratories use, they don't have that S gene kit. But if those who have the S gene kit, this particular virus skips the S gene, so the S gene doesn't get amplified. So it's like a proxy. If you get a test done with a kit that also generally amplifies the S gene, and it doesn't get amplified, then you can say, oh, it could actually be Omicron. But we need to do the sequence. The sequence is the main thing. And fortunately, after the second wave, the government of India has already got about 12 to 13 very important centers in India, and they have been allocated to various mm, regions of India to do this sequencing there. Although we need to really expand even more, we need to really make those sequencing centers double the number now, because the number of infections are expected to grow. But the test that we have at the moment, it will identify whether you're positive or not. So at the moment, the strategy of the government of India is, if it is a positive, then it immediately goes for this sequencing as well to know whether it is Omicron or not. But even till today, most of the virus infections that we are seeing are actually Delta.
Sir, someone has asked this question: if the virus remains long enough in a population pool, can the mutation be lethal over time and render the vaccine shots useless in the coming future? If yes, what to do about anti vaxxers around the world then?
So that's the point that I was trying to say, that if Omicron actually transmits very fast, and we don't want that to come over in India, because it will then create a very heavy virus load. Our community immunity could be affected. At the moment, India is doing extremely well. As I said, more than two-thirds of the adult population has already been fully vaccinated, and only 23 crores have got one dose. It's only that very small group now, but it's not very small, about 10 crores, 9 to 10 crores who have not got any vaccine so far. Moreover, the second wave, after the second wave, our zero surveys have indicated a lot of people have developed antibodies due to the natural infection. So what we have is a hybrid immunity. So at the moment, somebody who has got a earlier infection and got cured and has also got two doses of the vaccine, he or she is the safest zone, you know zone actually. But even those who got two vaccines over there, so we really do not want the virus load in the community to grow higher and higher, because once the virus load grows up, then you are going to infect even more, and the people who are unvaccinated, they could actually transmit the virus even faster.
Okay. So, sir, two follow up questions to this. What do you make of the current decision to give booster shots to a certain age group amongst the population? And also, what do you make of the 15 to 18 age group vaccination drive? Is that the direction in which we should be going? Would that be helpful or not?
Yes, at the moment, yes. I think what the decision that has been made is, people tend to look at antibody titers, and I have seen a lot of people going to go to the laboratories to get their antibody testing done and say, "Oh, my antibodies have gone down. Somebody else's antibodies are very high." As I said right in the beginning, antibody is just a one arm of the immunity. Antibody titers definitely go down after 4 to 6 or maybe 8 months of infection, because as I said, that the antibodies are formed by the B cells turning into plasma cells. The plasma cells have a short life. They don't live beyond 4 to 6 months of time. The other arm of the immunity is very intact. So people who have got vaccinated, even the 60 plus group, do not have to worry about, because they are fully protected. Because if they've got the two doses of the vaccine, they don't have to really worry at all. The booster dose, at the moment, we have said that people beyond 60 years of age, particularly those who have comorbidities, so they need to go to their doctor, and if the doctor confirms that yes, you have the comorbidity like diabetes, asthma, or even some kind of a cancer and all that, these are the people who need to be given the additional dose. Others can wait. I'm sure the others will also get. There are a lot of unanswered questions that we have got so far. You have learned from the Western literature, people who are given mRNA vaccines, they're going for the third dose of Covishield or the AstraZeneca, and the other way around. Those who got the AstraZeneca in the West, they're going for the mRNA. So mix and match uh, the vaccines could actually boost the immunity as well. That kind of a data is not yet in India, because at the moment the two major vaccines that we had in India are the Covishield and the Covaxin, and there is a study being done by our friends in CMC Bangalore, and that data should come very soon, of mix and match of Covishield and Covaxin. Those who have taken two doses of Covishield, can they take the Covaxin and the other way around? And I'm sure that data will come. Then it will become very clear that if you have taken Covishield, then the third dose should actually be Covaxin there. Now there are two more vaccines that are coming into India: the Corbevax and the Covivax, Covovax. Both of these are protein subunit vaccines, very very good. Where there is a nanoparticle based, and they're very safe. Covovax, which is a sort of new name given to the Novavax, actually, is manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, and they are themselves doing trials now that those who have got the Covishield 2 doses, if they take the third dose of the Covovax, will that further boost the immunity or not? So I think people should wait for some more time. My feeling is by the end of January, picture will become very clear actually. So at the moment, our focus should be on people 60 plus and those who have got the uh, comorbidity as well. They should not wait for this data to come. They can go ahead and take the same dose. If they've taken the vaccine earlier or the Covishield earlier, the third dose can be of the same vaccine. Others can wait. Now, the second point was about 15 to 18 years. Yes, that's a very vulnerable group because even in the second wave we saw, you see, generally children don't get infection. Even if they get infection, it is a symptom form. And you saw that the zero survey data clearly showed that a lot of these children, at least more than two-thirds of the children, had antibodies. And this antibody was due to the natural infection. And they had no idea that they had been infected. And the family had no idea that they had been infected. But the data was very clear that more than two-thirds of the children who were tested for the zero survey had those antibodies there. But the 15 to 18 group is a special group. These are not going to become adults. These are nearly adults actually. And in the second wave also, if there were any deaths, and there were very few deaths in the children who got infected, if there were any deaths, they were in this group only, the 15 to 18 group. This is the group which also mixes with the population, the friend circle, and this and that, because they're going to become adults very soon. So I think this is a very smart move by our expert group to vaccinate these first, because this is not a very small number actually. I'm told there are about 60 to 70 million children that we needed to vaccinate in this age group. And about one-tenth of these might even have comorbidities over there. So I think it's practically very, very important to save this group actually. So it's a smart move, and I'm sure by the time January ends, there will be more vaccines over there. By the way, I should also add that one more vaccine that is on the horizon is the mRNA-based vaccine in India. Is being manufactured by the group in Pune, Dr. Sanjay Singh and his company, and they are already in the phase 3 trial, and I'm sure that the data will become very clear by the end of January. And then you will have the mRNA based vaccine as well in India. So the booster dose, the additional dose, you will have a choice, but we have to wait for the data to come. Somebody was saying that, oh, you already have data from UK and Europe, why don't you use that? That's not a smart move. There are population based differences. We just cannot extrapolate the data from European population to the Indian population for precisely the same reason I talked to you earlier, that the microbial load and the immunity, the difference between Indians and the Westerners. So we have to debate for our own data to come.
Sir, a lot of people in the live stream are asking this question because ये सबके दिल पे लगी हुई चीज है. अभी जैसे ही हुआ है कि pan India, we've seen different kinds of restrictions coming across in the form of night curfews. कोई बोलता है 9 बजे बंद करो, कोई बोलता है 11 बजे बंद करो, कोई बोलता है 11:30 करो. So जैसे ऐसा लगता है कि कोरोना शहंशाह है, सिर्फ रात को निकलता है, दिन में नहीं निकलता है. Sir, as an expert, what do you make of these different kinds of restrictions that are coming across India? Because obviously, we are a poor country and we have to balance the livelihood of people, and we have to take care of the life. So in such a scenario, what would be the effective strategy? Isn't policy making about effectivity and not just देखो हमने कुछ किया?
देखिए, ऐसा है कि ओमिक्रॉन has just entered India, and Omicron is definitely going to grow and grow. So I think I agree with you that some governments, some state governments are probably overdoing actually. Curfew in the night and close the shops at 5 p.m. and this is going to affect the livelihood of a lot of people. But I think wait for another 2 weeks or so, we will know exactly how Omicron is shaping up. Is Omicron driving more infections? At the moment, for example, yesterday there were 35,000 infections in India, 33,000 infections in India, and today again I see about the same number. Actually, it's not boosting too much. The only two cities where it is growing very fast are Delhi and Mumbai. And that's primarily because of the fact that these are the ones where the international flights come. Because even now, it is clear that most of the Omicron that we are seeing is actually related to international travel and those guys who come into contact with them, and therefore you're seeing the rise more in Delhi and Mumbai or maybe in Calcutta. So I think we are still in a very safer zone, absolutely fine, but the governments have to take some cautionary measures actually. I'm sure very soon they will probably be lightened because Omicron does not give you a very severe disease. But what we need to know is Omicron driving the Delta infection as well. Delta is our major variant of concern.
Hmm. So someone in the live stream has asked, does the intensity of side effects in an individual have any correlation to vaccine efficacy on the individual? Because there seem to be conflicting opinions on this too.
I guess what the person is asking is that some people develop long COVID and it's because of the vaccine or the host immunity. But that is true. There are some people who develop long COVID. Actually, the COVID keeps on giving trouble for more time than it is seen in others, and that's true all over the world as well. But that is true also in other viral infections as well. You're seen in dengue. You're seen in flu virus. Some people tend to develop it much longer, and there are some host factors in them which we do not understand as yet. You have seen that a lot of people who developed dengue in the past or other viral infections, and they had a very long time to recover actually. So there are host factors. It's not due to the vaccine. The vaccine will anyway try to the vaccines are harmless. They're not going to. Some people might develop a little ache at the site of infection or small fever, a very brief fever, or some time. But otherwise, the vaccines are very safe, and this is not due to the vaccine. It is the host factors that we don't understand. But some people do develop their long COVID, and that is besides primarily because of the fact that I did talk to you right in the beginning that the AC2 receptors on which the virus binds are not only found in the lungs but they're also found into many other organs as well, and the GI tract, for example, the heart, the liver, and their kidneys, and some people do develop problems due, due to that. Yeah.
So, sir, something which I actually wanted to ask you before, but I forgot, so I'm going to ask it now. On the deaths, you mentioned the deaths in India are significantly lower now. There are so many papers in courts that are coming out saying that India is intentionally underreporting its COVID deaths. It is, there are more than 5 million or 10 million. Like, the deaths in reality are 30x, I read in one paper, of what the government of India is reporting. And they base their entire analyses on the basis of what deaths are happening in the United States of America, and then they extrapolate that and say India is lying. What do you make of those accusations that India is actually fudging data when it comes to death by
I
COVID?
have also heard those kind of things, but I can tell you, I go to a couple of very big labs in India, and every time a case positive TV comes, every time there's a positive case, it is mandatory for the laboratory to report there online. So to say that the number of infections were much higher than the ones that have been reported, I don't believe, because the system has been made very, very tight. Similarly, the deaths, where would the dead go? The dead have to be buried, or the dead have to be burned. The mission has to be done. There are
सर,
all
उन्होंने तो बोल दिया था ना, गंगा मैया में फेंक दिया उन्होंने शरीरों को, वो यहाँ तक बोल दिया था.
भाई, जो गंगा मैया में फेंके जा रहे हैं वो आज की बात नहीं है, वो तो कस्टम है उनका. दैट्स द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंडिया. इंडिया is a very diverse country with very diverse cultures, diverse ways of life and all that. So this has been happening like that as well, many many centuries like this. So I don't think so. So I don't trust that. There could be some numbers here and there, but that can happen anywhere around the world. And you have seen that during the pandemic, during the second wave, some states had underreported their deaths, and that's because they had done a calculation was done wrongly, and then they were added onto the lot. So I am one of those who believe that more or less the death rate and the infection rate that has been seen in India is absolutely correct. There could be variation, can definitely be there here and there, but that can happen anywhere around the world.
Sir, one last question before I let you go. Sir, media is playing a very weird role in this entire pandemic. There is so much panicking. अभी बोल देते हैं जी कोई डेल्मीक्रॉन आ गया है, कोई बोलता है फ्लोरोना आ गया है इसराइल में, कोई ये कर देता है, एक आर्टिकल आता है पूरे व्हाट्सएप में, इंटरनेट पे पूरा घूम जाता है. वैसे ही लोग डरे हुए हैं और डर जाते हैं सर. सो माय रिक्वेस्ट टू यू बिफोर वी रैप टुडेस डिस्कशन अप, कैन यू एड्रेस दीज पीपल?
You have seen that I also appear on the television many, many times, and my feeling is, and pardon me from the anchors. I sometimes feel that the anchors come with a fixed view. They want their guests to give an answer in the line that they have thought about it. After all, the media is also a private channel, and they want their channel to sort of grow and all. But I think most of the experts that come on the channels, they are very they're very senior people. They sort of give the actual picture over there. I have also seen that those issues like Delmicron and things of that sort. I don't think so. There is only one case that I know of, a 90-year-old woman who was found to have both Delta as well as the Omicron. How many more have we seen? Nil. And she also then eventually died, actually. So I don't think things like Delmic, these are all maybe saleable words. Um, Sometimes the media also tries to uh, put across a point that people should not lower their guards. People have to be on the guard. And even today, when I say Omicron is a milder form of the variant, it causes a very milder disease there. People should not lower their guards. And this is again, I am going saying people should not lower their guards. People, when they go out, must wear their mask, because this particular variant is very highly transmissible. We don't want the same kind of a picture to come in India. For example, in UK, where they're having 1.1 lakh infections a day. Yesterday, I saw in New York itself, there were about 90,000 infections. We can't afford that kind of a thing in India. We don't want the infection to grow unabashedly in India, because that would put a lot of pressure on our hospitals system. People will go into the panic mode, although there's no need to go into the panic mode, because the two things are very clear. First, our levels of immunity are better, as I said, both due to the natural infection as well as due to the vaccination. Second, we are also much better prepared in terms of the facilities and in terms of the infrastructure there. We have plenty of oxygen plants, the ICU beds, the ventilators, something that we didn't have during the second wave. So people should not worry. People should not unnecessarily rush to the hospital. And you have seen that happens even due to the flu infection. A flu virus, somebody develops a fever of 102, 103, or sometimes going to 104, and they rush to the hospital. Uh, this is the same thing here. I think what the Omicron so far has shown all over the world, including in India, is like a flu-like sym- symptoms. But at the same time, I keep saying we don't want the infection to keep growing. We don't want the viral load to grow in the population of India. We don't want the community immunity to be affected. At the moment, we are in a much safer situation. I would say that India is in a much safer situation compared to any other country around the world.
All right, sir. Once again, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. It's always amazing to talk to you. आप शांति से explain करते हो, because to be very honest, I have stopped watching news media now for a few years, because if you go on the news channels, it's almost as if the whole world is going to collapse. Everybody is going to die, and I don't know what else is going to happen. So once again, sir, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast and explaining everything calmly and in detail, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaskar.
All right, guys, time to wrap today's discussion up. Once again, please go and read all the articles I've shared in the description of the podcast. I have shared the link of Dr. Mehra's piece of op-eds that he's written for the Hindustan Times. Also, you can just go and read the paper that he had written. Actually, if you Google it, I think it's available online. Other than that, please support the Cārvāka podcast. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comments over there. Maybe if you have any more questions, you can send them across. Maybe I can, maybe I'll forward them to Dr. Mehra. And please support the podcast. I try my best to host responsible discussions on this podcast through this platform. I believe people should be informed, not scared. We have to be cautious but optimistic. And please support this podcast. You can go to YouTube or on Patreon, or you can send your donations through UPI or buy the merch. And please wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, please get vaccinated. If you are eligible for a booster shot or between the 15 to 18 age group, please get a vaccine. Do not become an anti-vaxxer. It makes no sense. So I'll leave you guys at that. Take care. Bye bye.